It's a challenge when you think about the numbers of communities that are struggling with affordable housing. It's a problem when you consider that 46% of renters in the U.S. are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. But when you discover that nearly half of those same renters are spending 50% of their income on housing, it's a crisis. Until recently, conversations about housing needs have been had primarily among housing advocates. Today, we're all talking about it. You most likely know someone, a friend, a family member, a colleague, struggling to find an affordable place to live. It might even be you. There's a lot of reasons why communities are struggling with affordable housing. It's a complex problem. There's a lot of theorizing about it, debates on causes, and ideas how to fix it. I wish I had the magic bullet, but I don't. None of us do. But what I do have and can bring to this conversation is my perspective. A perspective that has come from working more than 15 years alongside local housing advocates and community volunteers to provide shelter and services to individuals and families. It's come from my work with Family Promise, a program in partnership with faith communities providing shelter and hospitality to the unhoused or homeless. And it comes from my work with Habitat for Humanity's families on their journey to home ownership. Over the years, I've had hundreds of conversations about housing needs. Conversations with local leaders and service providers, funders, and residents. Those conversations most often focus on who or what to blame and frustrations about why they or it won't change. At times, our community conversations have been pretty active with goals and objectives, only to have them fizzle out when it comes to implementation. But here's the rub. Having enough adequate housing for all of our residents isn't just a nice feature for a community. It's an economic imperative. Without the right mix of housing for all of our residents, including retail and service workers, government employees, and medical support staff, a community is gambling with its economic stability. A community is like a delicately balanced organism, needing all of its residents living and working together to thrive. Upsets that balance drastically, and you may begin to threaten its ability to survive. But it's not all bad news. There are communities effectively planning, creating strategies, and making progress. What is it that enables them to move from talk to action? How do they find the time and the commitment to tackle this critical issue? There is a fundamental characteristic I believe they all share. Simply stated, they have the community will. That is, the desire and determination to make the provision of adequate housing for all of their residents of highest priority. These communities' approach to housing accessibility is like the athlete who wants to improve his or her game. They know that just talking about the goal isn't going to get them to the finish line. You gotta want it bad enough, and you gotta have the determination to do whatever it takes to make it happen. Success comes from hard work, discipline, focus, and sacrifice, and the right attitude, a winning attitude. These communities have widened the lens on their housing needs, are examining the beliefs and attitudes that have framed their work. They're making honest assessments, and they're, most importantly, looking at what's not working. And they're willing to admit the ways they become their own worst enemies. This kind of community self-reflection could reveal some insanity. You know, when you keep hoping for improvements, but you keep creating the same ineffective strategies only to end up with the same ineffective outcomes. It's hard to think outside the box when you created boundaries with the same limited beliefs and attitudes. One way to begin this reflection is by listening to the community conversations being had both publicly and privately about the housed or unhoused. One of those conversations you might hear begins with "those people." Those people wouldn't have trouble finding housing if they had made better life decisions, if they worked harder to improve their situation, or if they could learn to handle money better. In my experience, those people are some of the hardest working individuals I've ever met. Imagine the challenge of spending a year of your life as a single parent, balancing a full-time job and your family needs while trying to complete hundreds of sweat equity hours to build and purchase a Habitat home. Conversations about those people begin to reflect an attitude that some are more deserving than others when it comes to housing. In discussion about solutions, it's important to consider who we keep inviting to the table. The rooms I've been in most often include community leaders, business professionals, decision makers, those we deem to have the wisdom and expertise. But what about those with lived experience? Hardly ever invited to the table are those neighbors who are actually grappling with rising housing costs and the lack of affordable options. Collecting resident surveys and gathering data is fine, but that's often where the conversation ends. Imagine what might emerge with collective problem solving. When we limit access to the table, we miss out on the important creative ideas and insights of these residents. How a community feels about affordable housing and its beneficiaries is reflected in its policies, programs, and projects. It's also reflected in how services and funding are allocated to the need. Consider, for example, a community in which unsheltered individuals are perceived as unsafe or a public nuisance. Believing that those people need to be handled could lead to policies that punish and criminalize. Funding that could actually be used for sheltering service is instead diverted to increase policing and public safety, and doing little to solve the problem. Finding solutions to our housing needs is a community-wide challenge. But often the responsibility is dropped in the lap of social or municipal service agencies. But how can we expect to find far-reaching answers from entities who are limited in scope by a mission or mandate that dictates their outcomes, their actions, and their funding? To find the most effective and sustainable solutions, our call to action must be community-wide. We all want the place we live and work and play to thrive. But to do so, it must be economically safe and secure. Providing enough housing and the right mix of affordability enables a community to support the essential diversity and contribution of all of its residents, and thereby ensuring its sustainability. It takes courage to widen the lens and make an honest assessment. Doing this work provides insights into the beliefs, conversation, and actions that have framed our responses. With this understanding, we can begin to rethink our work and solutions within a new framework of inclusivity, collective problem-solving, and compassion. Like the athlete whose game needs improving, hard work and the right attitude leads to the goal. It's a tough game, providing for the housing needs of all of our residents. But with the will, the dedication and commitment, a community can truly set itself up for the win.